On the line with us right now is Mark Potok. He is for 20 years, he was the guy who led the Southern Poverty Law Center in exposing hate groups, right-wing terrorism, the rapidly increasing infiltration of extremist ideas into the political mainstream. He's now Mark, welcome back to the program, first of all.
Well, thanks for having me again, Tom. I sure appreciate it.
It's always great to have you with us. You are no longer with the SPLC?
Yeah, that's right. I left in March and have been beginning to pull together some other projects, principally a book I'm thinking of writing in the next year or two.
That's great.
Essentially about the rise of the radical right in the United States.
Yeah, I wish you the very best on that. But you are, one of the leading experts on this whole issue. There's a couple things here that I'd like to just kind of put on the table and let you riff on. I wrote an op-ed on this over the weekend that I believe Alternet will be publishing later on today, in which I point out that basically the whole Republican strategy of reaching out to white racists, as everybody knows, started with Nixon with the Southern strategy, and then Reagan and the whole Lee Atwater thing, and speaking in Philadelphia, Mississippi, et cetera. But that the reason that there's behind this, you've got this group of basically billionaires and polluting companies that now own the Republican Party. And they don't give a rat's ass about racism. They don't care about bigotry. They don't care about abortion rights. They don't care about women's health. They don't care whether people have health insurance or not. They just don't want to pay taxes, and they want to be deregulated. But they realize, as they fund this giant Republican machine that they have taken over with the help of the Supreme Court, they realize that they have to have the rubes. They have to have the voters, that there are people who really, abortion is more important to them. White supremacy is more important to them. Having their guns and making up for their little penises is more important to them than whether or not anybody has health care, or whether the air is clean, or whether the planet is melting down, or whatever. And so, the billionaires who fund the Republican Party are quite happy to tolerate the Republicans reaching out to these various fringe groups that the billionaires don't give a damn about in order to get enough people to get themselves elected, number one. And number two, I'd love to hear your thoughts on why is it? I lived in Germany for a year, 1986, 87. I never saw a monument to a German general. The Nazis ran Germany for 11 years. The Confederates ran the southern part of the United States for 4 years. Why is it that Germany has no statues to Rommel and, et cetera, whereas you find Robert E. Lee all over the United States? What the hell is going on here? And then, feel free to pontificate on your thoughts of what happened over the weekend.
Well, yes, first of all, I agree that the sort of millionaire business interests behind the Republican Party don't care much about these issues at all until they start to impinge on their advertising, right? I mean, when their ads, seem to be getting them in bed with people making racist statements and so on. But outside of that, I think the interest is very, very thin. And, what we really see, it seems to me, happening to the Republicans is, the so-called party of Lincoln is now, courtesy of Donald Trump and some of his inner circle, really embracing this in an open way that's different than the way you're talking about the kind of business wing of the party embracing it. I think it's been obvious over the weekend as we listen to Trump's incredibly terrible statements on this. And I think for those sort of, the kind of moderate Republican pleas for Trump to say something, I think that is ridiculous, actually. And what I mean is this. I think that anything Donald Trump says about race and racism and white supremacy is an opportunistic lie, and we can simply assume that from the beginning, right? I mean, let's not forget where this guy came from and what he has done in the course of his presidency and the campaign before that. I think the thing is just, to me, infuriating. I mean, I think that people, Americans, should be demanding, if such thing is possible, not only that Trump get out there and say something, but that he actually do something. And that, to me, means throwing Steve Bannon out of the White House, throwing Sebastian Gorka out on the street, and doing the same with Stephen Miller, the three kind of principal exponents of this kind of open racism. And that's only a start. Obviously it's true about the Republican Party. And it's not only the history of the Southern strategy and later Reagan and so on, but, what's happened in the last few years, the incredible number of voter suppression measures. The newest thing we're seeing out there in the states with state after state, I think some 20 states now have legislation proposed this year that would limit protests in various ways.
Or legalize running over protesters.
Yeah, well, I mean, the legislation is aimed not at the white nationalists or groups like Vanguard America, but Black Lives Matter, anti-racist protesters, and so on.
And Dakota Access Pipeline.
I just think it's hard to express enough, anger with regard to Trump and his little gang. About Germany, yes. I mean, I know the German case really well. I spent a lot of time in Germany, have a lot of colleagues there in the anti-racist world. And, I think one thing that has to be said about Germany is that more than any other place I can think of, really, in history, the Germans as a society have really genuinely repudiated Nazism, National Socialism. That's not to say, obviously, there are things like the NPD and various small Nazi groupings, but they have really been repudiated by the society, and the absence of any kind of statues or memorials really reflects that. I mean, if you go to Berlin, what you see are memorials to victims of the Holocaust and things like that. Let me say one other thing about monuments in this country. I mean, in a way, the Robert E. Lee statue in Charlottesville is in a sense one of the most benign statues out there. I just like to say that there are some statues, some memorials, for instance, an obelisk in the city of Colfax, Louisiana, a small town in a very backward part of Louisiana, not far from Gina, as a matter of fact, which is a monument, literally, quote unquote, to white supremacy. It is a monument mourning the deaths of 3 white racists who participated in an early Reconstruction massacre of about 150 black people who were trying to defend their voting rights. So, that's what really these monuments represent. And, for the incredibly disingenuous arguments from so-called moderates about, this is just history and you can't erase history, I just think that's unbelievably disingenuous. And, you brought up, I thought, rightly, the example of Germany is a completely different case.
Yeah. Here's Donald Trump, who has, going back to the 80s or 90s, whenever it was when the Central Park Five, these 5 young black and Hispanic men who were accused of raping this woman in the park and nearly, beating her to death. And it turns out that when the DNA evidence came in, it was a serial killer, as I recall. It was a white guy who did it, and it was not any of these kids. And yet, even in the face of that evidence, Trump continued to stand behind his ad that he bought in the New York Times calling for the death penalty to be reinstated in New York State so it could be applied to these 5 young men of color. From that to, wondering out loud and basically turning it into an industry. If Barack Obama was, a secret Kenyan socialist, Muslim, whatever, to his anti-Muslim stuff, to his, it just goes on and on and on. It does not surprise me that Donald Trump refuses to call out the white racists. This, initially I was thinking this is his base, just like Nixon and Reagan. He is just exploiting these people. He thinks of them as rubes. Now I'm starting to think that he actually thinks of them as part of his family, that he identifies with them. What does, from your time at the Southern Poverty Law Center and the work you're doing right now, we're talking with Mark Potok, by the way, the former leader of the Southern Poverty Law Center, his website, markpotok, POTOK.net. What are your thoughts on, who is our commander-in-chief?
I think he's an unvarnished racist. Let's remember one of the things that I think is not mentioned when various people recite the litany of his racism too often is the fact that throughout his campaign, he repeatedly encouraged thuggish street violence against black protesters at his rallies, right? Again and again and again. When that young black man was sucker punched, I think he was maybe in Mobile, and famous video shot, The local sheriff described the man as a complete coward and so on. And Donald Trump, on the other hand, offered to fund the man's defense. So, it's not only these, relatively abstract things like his birtherism and so on, but it is, actually inciting violence against black people.
What do we do about this, Mark? We have about a minute and a half here before we're going to hit a break.
I don't know what we're going to do about it. I mean, it is incredibly disheartening to see what I think is still a pretty weak reaction from so-called moderates out there against the Republican Party and against Trump. And, what to me is sort of doubly enraging is to hear Sebastian Gorka, the supposed terror expert of Donald Trump, describing, among other things, the recent bombing of the Minneapolis mosque as a fake hate crime, suggesting initially that this could have been an attack by the left and so on. He actually just a few days ago said there has never been a serious attack unconnected to ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And as you know and I know, it's a complete and utter lie.
Right. Now,
it's being swallowed.
I've read that Gorka was a member of a Nazi group in what was it, Hungary?
Yes, he has ties. I don't know about a member.
Yeah.
And the group,
they're claiming him
seen as a neo-Nazi organization. He got some kind of medal that looks rather like a Nazi emblem from these people.
Remarkable. So maybe for the moment, the best disinfectant is sunlight?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there has to be. I'm glad to see people like the mayor in Charlottesville, taking such an active stance. And I'm glad to see that some people are using this to discuss the racism of the Republican Party or the racism that it employs.
Amen.